A lot of people think the hardest part of a literature review is the volume. So many articles, so many studies, so many smart people saying very, sometimes unnecessarily, complicated things. But volume is not actually the problem. The problem is what people think reading is supposed to do. If you treat every article or book chapter like it is something to obey or something to memorize or something to defer to, reading becomes exhausting very quickly. Not because you are slow, not because you are unprepared, but because you are trying to carry authority instead of make meaning. And that is not really how scholarly reading works. I'm Nick, this is Dr. Cranky Pants Teaches, and scholars do not read studies to find answers. They read to figure out what makes sense, what does not, and why. Now, here's the shift I want to name up front in this video. Scholarly reading is not about finding answers. It's about making sense of competing explanations. When people first enter doctoral work, there's often this unspoken assumption that published research represents settled truth, that if something appears in a journal, it must be correct or definitive or at least agreed upon. But that's not actually how scholarship works. Most research is provisional, contextual, and in conversation with other work that is doing something slightly different. So reading critically does not mean reading suspiciously. It means reading relationally. Every study is responding to something, a prior argument, a theoretical tradition, a problem framed in a very particular way. Your job as a reader is not to accept or reject a study in isolation. Your job is to understand what it is trying to do and how it fits into a larger landscape of ideas. And one way to make that visible is to pay attention to claims, because every study is making claims. Some of those claims are going to be explicit. Some are much quieter. Claims about what matters, claims about how problems should be understood, claims about what counts as evidence. And those claims are supported by evidence, but they are also shaped by assumptions, values, and methodological choices. And that's where persuasion comes in. Academic writing is not neutral reporting. It is carefully constructed persuasion. Authors make choices about which studies to cite, which theories to foreground, which findings to emphasize, and which limitations to acknowledge or minimize. Recognizing that does not make research untrustworthy. It makes it readable. So instead of asking, is this article right? You start asking, what case is this article making and how is it trying to convince me? And that question alone changes how you engage with the text. It also explains something that often surprises doctoral students. Disagreement in the literature is normal. In fact, it's actually pretty useful because if everyone agreed, there would truly be no field, no conversation, no reason to keep studying the issue. Disagreement shows you where ideas are contested, where explanations compete, where assumptions differ. Those are not places to avoid. Those are places where thinking is happening. And when you encounter disagreement, it helps to resist the urge to resolve it too quickly. You do not need to decide who is right. Instead, you can ask, what different assumptions are operating here? What different contexts are being emphasized? What different outcomes are being prioritized? Often, disagreement is not about error. It is about perspective, which is why treating literature as authority can actually flatten your thinking. If you read studies as final answers, you miss the relationships between them. If you read them as contributions to an ongoing effort to make sense of complex problems, something else is going to open up. You start to see patterns in how people argue, in what kinds of evidence carry weight, in what questions get asked repeatedly, and which ones stay at the margins. And that is sense-making. And it's a skill you build over time. It does not require you to be an expert in every method or theory represented in the literature. It requires you to stay curious about how knowledge is being constructed, And one practical way to support that kind of reading is to slow down just enough to notice what a study is centered on. That doesn't mean you have to pay attention to every detail, just the core moves. What problem is being named? What explanation is being advanced? What kind of evidence is being used to support it? You do not need to answer those questions perfectly. You just need to start asking them consistently. And over time, patterns emerge because once you start seeing patterns, synthesis becomes easier. This is also where the work from the previous video and this one come together. Synthesis tells you what literature is doing at the level of ideas, and sense-making helps you understand how individual studies contribute to that picture. One without the other leaves you either overwhelmed or oversimplifying. Together, they give you traction. If this is new or uncomfortable, that's expected, because reading this way takes practice. But it also tends to make the reading you're already doing feel more purposeful and less like compliance. Now, in the next video, we'll stay with this shared foundation. Literature is not an authority you submit to. It's a resource you use to make sense of complicated problems. Now, if this made reading research feel a little less intimidating and a little more navigable, that matters. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one.